I want to take some time to talk about invasive species in Minnesota. This is a very important thing to me because I really do care about the environment around me. Yeah, and invasive species are always trying to, hamper that, trying to cramp on the environment style, as they say, hopefully. And I just want to talk about different kinds of invasive species out there and what we can do to help prevent them. So, starting off, we have the plant type invasive species. Plants are very hard to identify because how much they look like other plants. You can just be walking around and you don't even notice that there's an invasive species plant right there, and right next to a native one because, well, sometimes they're just plants. Can't really tell. Invasive plants can increase fire risk, soil permeability, and erosion in areas. They disrupt agriculture, but like every single plant that grows on farmland is considered a problem and needs to be taken care of. And invasive plants also affect the food for wild grazing animals. Like a bison can go in an area and say, "What is all this gross stuff? I want grass." Whatever bison eats. Animals themselves, insects are the most common invasive type of animals since they multiply and spread quickly. Most larger animals such as fish, birds, and some mammals have been released intentionally for hunting or escape their captivity from farms. Other. You won't see them, they will see you. Don't think that's a good enough description of what other is. So buckthorn. Buckthorn's around 25 feet tall. Can be identified by its small oval sawtooth leaves. Sawtooth being like the little jaggedness around the leaves. And they also have small black fruits around here, as you can see right there. What they do is they outcompete with native plant species in areas, and they grow around edges of the forest more common. So when we fragmentation forest more, we get more forest edges, and with more forest edges, we get more buckthorn. So, that. Honeysuckle. This one surprised me because I did not know honeysuckle was an invasive species until this. So honeysuckles shade over native plants and deplete soil nutrients. The same old, same old. They can be identified by the white or magenta flowers or the small bright red berries that they grow. Now, honeysuckles are definitely a very pretty plants, but you know what they say? Actually, I don't know what they would say. But they are a beautiful flower. However, if they're going to outcompete with the native flowering species there, they should be removed. Eurasian waterfin oil blocks out sunlight from reaching the bottom of the water, so that's like species that kind of dwell on the bed of the lakes. They can't get the sufficient sunlight that they need or have been accustomed to getting. And disrupts native plants and doesn't provide appropriate shelter to native fish species. So basically, a small fish will try to hide in this stuff. The big fish will find it and eat it, and then it'll just end up eating all the smaller, prey fish in the areas. Then there's suddenly no more fish for the big fish to eat, and then all the big fish die out, and then suddenly no more fish in the lake. That's why these guys are a problem. Siberian elm disrupts prairie land, grows to tree height, can grow in poor soil and lower moisture, or just like in Siberia, and cross-pollinates with native elms, making them hard to identify. Right here, I have two pictures of seeds. One is a native one, and one is a Siberian elm. Try to identify the difference between the two because I can't. I legitimately can't. Yellow iris, another pretty beautiful looking flower, competes with native shoreline vegetation. These are still legal to buy and sell, but if you plant them near or on public waters, they will actually get you for that. So I guess you can have them in like a potted plant or something. Get identified by the bright yellow flowers and kind of like the honeysuckle. Well, they're pretty, but if they're going to outcompete with native species, they gotta go. Now we're going on to the animals, starting off with the common carp. These guys, dredge up the entire biomes, feeding on all the aquatic plants, and by doing so releases the phosphorus down below, causing mass algae growths and impacts the food of waterfowl and some amphibians. And the jumping varieties have been known to injure boaters. These guys also compete with walleye in the areas, and they will eat tons of walleye eggs, completely destroying their populations. And if you ever had walleye, delicious fish. So that's why these guys are a big problem. Zebra mussels. So these guys have spread like wildfire throughout the areas, mostly because they have a very large growth capacity, 100,000 to 500 eggs per year. They do massive damage to water infrastructures. There's like if you can see images of pumps or water grates completely covered in zebra mussels, and basically makes them ineffective. They can survive 21 days out of water in semi-wet conditions, which is amazing. So for 21 days, these guys can be there, and with a little, little spray mist, yes, they're fine to go. Chinese mystery snails, like the zebra mussels, these guys impact native mussel populations by outcompeting their food sources. And they cause large die-offs in areas. Because if you've ever been swimming in a lake and then you notice, like, suddenly you're surrounded by 10 snail shells, that just happens. And, decaying dead stuff smells bad, but good lord, do these smell bad. These guys were theorized to be introduced by aquarium dumpings in the mid-1800s. So, the lesson of this is don't dump your aquarium fish in rivers and streams. Don't dump your pets or release them. The mute swan, another one I was surprised wasn't actually a native species. Just like all demon species of geese and swans, they're hyper aggressive and can have huge impacts on native aquatic plant populations. They are a regulated invasive species though, and they can be kept for having licenses, but release of them is illegal. So if they find out that you've been releasing mute swans, they'll find you. European starling. You've probably seen these guys around suburban areas because that's where they like to be, because in suburban areas there's a lot less predator population and they like to nest up in households corners and stuff, especially around older buildings. They were introduced in 1872. And they outcompete native birds for nesting and food and eat agricultural products and livestock feed. Livestock feed being mostly just corn, because that's the thing that we decided to only feed our cattle is corn. Other, once again, don't look outside. They're there. They've always been there. Don't acknowledge them. It doesn't really give a description about what they are. Yeah, if you wanted to let people know like what other is, you needed to actually like describe them, what they are. Japanese beetles. These guys are annoying. These guys are annoying as hell. Oh, first off, if you're like ever on a day, they'll just fly into your face. You're like, no, get off, But they cause massive damage to crops and native plants, such as basswood trees and grapevines. And the beetle grubs can go around and eat entire sections of crop roots, killing them off. They were accidentally introduced in the US in 1916, and their population increase didn't really start until 2001. Wait a minute. 2001. What else happened in 2001? My god. That's when Wikipedia started. Wikipedia caused the Japanese beetle growth to happen. Oh my god. God. This bit is dumb. Brown marmorated stink bug. These guys damage crops. Arrived in the 90s, wasn't really discovered until 2010, mostly because they look very similar to native species of stink bugs. So, out of these ones, which one's the brown marmorated stink bug? It's this one. Oh no, wait, was it this? No, I'm pretty sure it was this one. Yeah. Asian longhorn beetle. These guys are detrimental to large trees such as maple, ash, and birch, and they just tunnel through the trees, making them susceptible for diseases. Very identifiable though. Oh, you can see the beetle right here. They get pretty big. Larva, kind of big. Very identifiable though. Jumping worms, the new kids on the block. You might be knowing them as snake worms, Alabama jumpers, and crazy worms, because this is what they sometimes label them for fishing bait. Now, how these guys are spread because people obviously dump their bait because they're like, oh, they're just earthworms. They don't dump your baits. And they move like snakes and secrete yellow mucus, which makes them more identifiable against common earthworms. So if you see a worm kind of secreting yellow mucus, actually my shirt's yellow, that's a jumping worm. Ash borer, probably the most detrimental one to Minnesota because Minnesota is known to have the most amount of ash trees in the area. And they look like this, and they're very hard to see because they're only a ½ inch long, but they're pretty bright green. So maybe like that. And conservationists had to cut away huge acres of ash trees to try to help stop its spread. But even then, and with the transportation of firewood, these guys spread even farther and farther, infecting more ash trees. So I don't know if the state Minnesota still has the most ash trees in every state compared to any state because of this, but huge detrimental effects. So, how can we help counteract some of these invasive species? Invasive plants. Most invasive plants can be counteracted by identifying them and removing them. For aquatic plants especially, make sure to clean out the bottom of your boats and any holding tanks because they can get stuck to the bottom of boats, and then you go to another water and then they get released, and then it's a problem there as well. Make sure when flowers being planted that it won't affect the local ecosystem. And you know what? If you really want to help out your ecosystem or your local community's ecosystem, plant native wildlife flowers that can help pollinators. There are plenty out there. It just takes a little bit of research, and you know what? It makes your yard look a lot better if you just plant a little bit of pollinator flowers. Invasive bugs. Many invasive bugs can be spread by stop taking firewood from one area to another. But this is going to be very hard to do because as firewood is also traded on the international level. So as long as we have an international logging trade, we're still going to keep seeing these invasive bugs come along. But all is not lost because for insects like the Japanese beetle and the emerald ash borer, special traps have been made. You've probably seen them around where they look like kites up in trees, but no, those are traps for those insects. So we are definitely trying to think of ways to counteract them. Obviously, there are pesticides, but those can help. But those are indiscriminate and more likely will affect pollinator and native insect populations rather than the one that we want to go after. Asian carp. Conservation efforts of dams and reversing river flows have stopped the carp from entering Great Lakes, which is really good. Though they're not tasty, they can be caught in multiples and fun, and it's fun to go on an afternoon to take a baseball bat in the boat and see how many you can hit when they are jumping out the water. This is a legitimate thing. This is a legitimate thing you can do. You can go down the Mississippi River, take a baseball bat, and go hit some sluggers with some Asian carp. And these are definitely more managed at the local level because there are some local communities that will have like these festivals where they drop large amounts of these carps from cranes as like a big way to celebrate the festival. So Asian carp are definitely more managed at the local level rather than the by a service or a major conservation effort. European starling. Monitor birdhouses and modify them to make them native bird friendly. D-shaped holes for martin houses keeps them out. And you know what? Always try to encourage your little native bird friends from entering your area, such as using starling-proof suet feeders. And you know what? If all else fails, a simple BB gun will also do the trick. Probably get that sucker to like 3-5 pumps. Just take a crack shot. Zebra mussels, very hard to remove them once introduced. They, like I said, spread like wildfire. And the only way the DNR has really been able to get rid of them is they had to kill the lake and then reintroduce native species. But we can help stop the spread by cleaning boats, especially large cargo ships. This can just stop zebra mussel growth and spread it. Other, This doesn't say anything about. In all, be aware and be conscious. Learn more about the native species out there. There are a lot that do a lot of ecological services for you, and you should respect and help them. And if you see invasive species in your area, contact your local DNR. and this can help stop the spread as soon as possible, which is what we want. Here are a bunch of sources that I used. All these will be linked down in the description below. And be safe and be aware. So yeah, those were all the invasive species. So I hope you all learned something from this. I certainly did. And yeah, learn more about your community and the species that live there. I'm gonna go lock my doors now.